Sagebrush Hollow wasn't on most maps, a dusty smudge of a town, halfway between nowhere and forgotten, where time walked slower and folks whispered more than they spoke. One saloon, one blacksmith, one crooked sheriff, and one old man who minded his business. That old man was known simply as Eli, quiet as morning mist. He spent his days fixing saddles, whittling wood, and sipping coffee stronger than sin itself. No one in town ever saw him raise his voice, let alone his hand. Kids ran past his porch without fear. Dogs dozed beside him without worry. And the drunks at Sally's saloon paid him no mind. Eli liked it that way, until the Branner gang came through. They rolled in just past high noon, 7 of them on horseback, dust trailing behind like a ghost parade. The leader, Colt Branner, had a voice like a whip crack and a temper twice as quick. Fresh from robbing a Union gold convoy, they wanted a place to lie low. Sagebrush Hollow was perfect quiet, unsuspecting, and too small to fight back. They made themselves known fast. Sheriff Doolin, always more coward than lawman, offered no resistance when they took over the saloon and demanded lodging. By sundown, 2 locals were dead, one for staring too long, and another for talking too slow. The town trembled. Eli stayed on his porch. On the 3rd day, Colt noticed the old man. Maybe it was the calm way he peeled an apple with a Bowie knife. Maybe it was the stillness like a snake sunbathing, waiting. Or maybe Colt just wanted to scare the last unshaken soul in town. He strutted over, boots loud against the wood planks, chewing a cigar. "You deaf, old man," Colt spat. "Or just dumb?" Eli looked up slowly, blue eyes pale as ice water. He said nothing. Colt laughed, his boys gathering to watch. "I asked you a question. You live here, you pay tax now." To me, Eli set down his knife. Stood he was lean, wiry, not hunched like most old-timers. And when he looked at Colt, something ancient and cold stirred in his gaze. "I don't pay thieves," he said. The gang stiffened. Colt sneered, big words from a broken-down relic. Then he drew his revolver. Quick, but not quick enough. Eli moved like smoke. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the handle of the Bowie knife, twisted his wrist, and threw. The knife buried itself into the wooden post beside Colt's head, just a hair off center. Deliberate. The gang froze. Colt flinched. Eli stepped forward. "Leave this town. You've got until morning." Colt laughed again, but it was hollow now, the humor forced. "You'll regret that," he hissed. Eli's eyes never blinked. "I doubt it." The outlaws stormed off, muttering about crazy old bastards and finishing it tomorrow. The town buzzed with new whispers. Who was Eli really? Why wasn't he afraid? And how the hell did a man that age move like that? But no one dared ask him. That night, Eli sat alone in his cabin. The silence was thick. From a box beneath the floorboards, he pulled out a weathered gun belt, black leather, worn smooth by years of draw. His 6-shooter was still clean, oiled, ready. Beside it, a stack of yellowing letters. Each was signed with a name now whispered in saloons across the West. Cassidy, Reyes, Lobo Jim, Dusty Jane, Eagle Eye Hatch. Gunfighters feared in 5 territories. Each of them had once been a student. Each of them had called him teacher. He lit a lamp and stared at the gun in his hand. It felt like shaking hands with an old ghost. He hadn't drawn in 20 years. But tomorrow, it seemed, the past was riding back into town. The desert wind was restless that night. It whistled between shuttered windows and wind beneath doors, whispering rumors of blood to come. Sagebrush Hollow had known droughts, dust storms, even raids by Comanche riders back in the day, but this was different. The air tasted like iron, like something old was waking up. Most folks didn't sleep. They huddled in their homes, lanterns dimmed, ears strained for the sound of hooves or gunfire. Sally closed her saloon early. Sheriff Doolin locked himself in the jailhouse and polished his badge like it meant something. Only Eli stayed calm. He sat on his porch until the moon was high, sharpening a single bullet with a small file, working the lead like a craftsman. Not many men knew how to cut a slug to spin crooked in fly. Tilly had taught that trick to men who could shoot wings off flies. When the work was done, he set the bullet aside and opened a faded ledger. Its cover was cracked leather, the pages filled with careful handwriting, names, locations, notes on draw speed, posture, weaknesses, the old code of a teacher. He paused on one entry. Colt Branner, age 19. Draw speed, fast but flinches on recoil. Taught for 2 months. Arrogant, not ready. Dismissed. Guess you didn't take rejection. Well, Eli muttered. He closed the book and placed it beside the revolver. Just before dawn, hooves thundered into town. The Branner gang returned angry, armed, and louder than before. This time, Colt wasn't posturing. He wore a black duster and twin pistols low on his hips, walking with the confidence of a man who'd killed more times than he could count. The townsfolk peeked from behind curtains. Tension crackled. Colt stood in the middle of Main Street and shouted, "Come on out, old man. Let's settle this." Eli stepped outside. Not in a rush, not in fear. He wore the old gun belt now. His boots thudded softly against the dirt road, the silence between each step louder than thunder. "You sure you want this?" Eli asked, voice calm as the morning breeze. "I should have known," Colt spat. "I thought you looked familiar." "Eli Mercer, the gunman maker. Heard you crawled off to die somewhere." "I didn't crawl," Eli said. "I walked. By choice." Colt smirked. "Not walking out today." Though Eli looked at the sky. Pale light crept across the horizon. Shadows retreated. His fingers brushed the grip of his revolver. "Last chance, boy," he said. "Ride out. Live." Colt sneered. Draw. Silence. Then Steele sang. 2 shots. Cracked like thunder. The echo bounced off the canyon walls. Then a third. When the smoke cleared, Colt was on one knee, blood blooming through his coat. His right pistol lay feet away. Useless. Eli stood unharmed. The third shot had hit the ground beside Colt's boot on purpose. The gang looked between their fallen leader and the man they'd mocked as a relic. Some reached for guns then stopped. Eli was already turned, walking away. Calm, quiet, confident, just like the stories, said. Colt shouted hoarsely, "You could have killed me." Eli didn't turn. "I did, years ago, when I stopped teaching." "You." The gang scattered by noon, dragging their wounded leader with them. Sheriff Doolin emerged sometime after, wiping his brow and pretending he'd been watching from a tactical position. But the town didn't need him anymore. They had Eli by sundown. Folks gathered near the saloon, murmuring thanks, offering food, coffee, even whiskey. Eli accepted a slice of apple pie and nothing else. He didn't want praise. He just wanted peace. As the stars came out, a stranger approached from the edge of town. Young, tall, lean, a long coat and a long shadow. He didn't say his name, only handed Eli a letter. The paper was marked with a silver R, a symbol Eli hadn't seen in a long time. The letter read, "You've drawn again. That means you're needed. Meet us in Dry Mesa in 3 days. It's bigger than Branner, much bigger." Eli folded the letter without a word. The stranger tipped his hat and rode off. Eli stared into the night. He had hoped his gun would die with him. But some ghosts didn't stay buried. And some battles found you no matter how far you ran. Eli woke to the faint glow of dawn creeping through the cracks in his cabin walls. The letter lay on the small wooden table, the silver R glinting faintly like a silent summons. Dry Mesa, a name heavy with old memories and darker promises. He had hoped the past was done with him. But the West had other plans. The journey to Dry Mesa was long and unforgiving. Eli rode slowly, his horse steady but tired. The landscape a harsh wash of ochre and rust under an unrelenting sun. Along the way, he passed ghost towns swallowed by sand. Abandoned homesteads with weathered signs warning, "Leave this place." At a roadside tavern, Eli paused. The barkeep eyed him with a mix of suspicion and recognition. "Mercer, ain't it?" Eli nodded curtly. "Word is, you trained half the gunslingers who gave the West hell these past decades." "Only enough to survive," Eli said. "Not to die." The barkeep grunted. "Well, looks like you might be called back into the fight." Eli didn't answer. By the time he reached Dry Mesa, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows over the jagged cliffs and red rock formations. The town was a ramshackle collection of buildings clinging to survival, surrounded by the vast desert and sky that swallowed sound. Eli dismounted in front of the rusted Spur Saloon. The only place still, buzzing with life. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, whiskey, and tension. At a corner table, a woman waited. Her eyes were sharp, her stance poised like a panther ready to strike. She was younger than Eli but carried the weight of countless battles behind her gaze. She rose when he entered. "Teacher," she said quietly. "I'm Reyes." Reyes was one of Eli's best students. Fierce and fearless, she'd made a name for herself in the outlaw circles after his lessons. But something had changed. She looked tired, haunted. "We've got a problem," she said. "A new gang, calling themselves the Red Vultures. They're ruthless more than Branner ever was. They've taken over Dry Mesa and the surrounding territory. Eli nodded slowly. And you want me to help? She hesitated. We need your gun, your mind, your tactics. Eli took a deep breath. I left all that behind. Not everything, Reyes replied. Not when the West burns. They talked late into the night, planning, strategizing, and recalling old lessons. Reyes shared intelligence maps, marked with hideouts, supply routes, and the Red Vulture's brutal tactics. The gang wasn't just a band of outlaws. They were an organized force, terrorizing towns, controlling the trade routes, and killing anyone who stood in their way. Eli listened, eyes narrowing. The Red Vultures were ambitious, brutal, and dangerous, just the kind of fight he'd once welcomed outside. The desert wind howled, carrying with it the scent of gunpowder and dust. Eli stood alone for a moment. Staring at the horizon, he thought of the men and women he'd trained, those who'd become legends, and those who'd disappeared into the endless plains. He thought of his own hands. Steady, but marked by time, and he knew the West wasn't done with him yet. The next morning, Eli mounted his horse, Reyes by his side. Ready? She asked. He looked out over the barren land. Always. Together, they rode into the dawn, toward a battle that would test everything Eli had taught and everything he still carried inside. Dry Mesa faded behind them, swallowed by red dust and endless sky. The road ahead was rough, jagged with rocks and broken earth, but Eli rode steady. Reyes rode close beside him, her sharp eyes scanning every ridge and hollow. Together, they made a silent pact. This fight was bigger than either of them, but neither would back down. The Red Vultures weren't just a gang. They were a storm gathering over the West. As they approached the outskirts of a small town called Coyote's Crossing, signs of the Vultures' brutal rule were unmistakable. Buildings riddled with bullet holes, doors nailed shut, and the townsfolk who dared not look up. Reyes pulled Eli's horse to a halt behind an outcrop. They're here, she whispered. A group of Red Vultures lounged in the main street, armed and laughing like predators surveying fresh prey. Colt Branner's defeat had been a warning, but it hadn't stopped the tide of violence. The Red Vultures were well armed, ruthless, and growing by the day. Eli studied their formation, loose but confident, careless in their strength. We need to send a message, Eli said. Reyes nodded. Disrupt their supply lines. Hit them where they least expect it. Under the cloak of night, Eli and Reyes moved like shadows. They sabotaged wagon carts carrying ammunition, ambushed patrols, and freed prisoners from Vulture captivity. Each strike was precise, surgical, a whisper of fear that spread through the gang like wildfire. But the Red Vultures were no amateurs. They responded with brutality. Hostages disappeared. Bodies were left as warnings. The townsfolk were caught in the middle, and the line between friend and foe blurred. One evening, Eli and Reyes returned to a burning barn. Flames licked the sky. The scent of smoke was thick and bitter. They're getting desperate, Reyes said, voice tight. Eli's gaze hardened. So are we. Back at their makeshift camp, Eli pulled out the worn leather ledger pages, filled with the names of those he had trained, the lessons he had taught. He flipped to a page marked with a single name, Eagle Eye Hatch. Time to call. In a favor, he muttered. The next day, a rider appeared on the horizon, a tall figure with a wide-brimmed hat and eyes sharp, enough to split a hair at 50 paces. Eagle Eye Hatch was a legend, quick with a gun and quicker with a plan. Once Eli's best student, now a man whose reputation spread across the territories like wildfire. Eli met him at the edge of camp. The two men shared a brief nod, no need for words. Together, they devised a plan to dismantle the Red Vultures, piece by piece, using guerrilla tactics and old-school grit. The battle that followed was a dance of shadows and gunfire, ambushes at dawn, silent takedowns under the moon, traps laid deep in the canyons. The Red Vultures fought back fiercely, but with each loss, their grip on the territory weakened. Eli's presence was a spark reigniting the courage of the oppressed. His students fought with a fire that had never died, and the legend of the gunman maker grew with every shot fired. One night, as the stars glittered like cold diamonds overhead, Eli sat by the fire, cleaning his revolver. Reyes approached, quietly. You don't have to do this alone, you know, she said. Eli looked up, a flicker of something softer in his eyes. I didn't get this far by myself, he replied. And I won't finish alone. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The sun was a burning orange ball sinking behind the jagged cliffs of Dry Mesa, casting long, cruel shadows over the rugged landscape. The red vultures, once confident and ruthless, now crouched in makeshift fortifications around the town's outskirts, bracing for the inevitable. Eli Mercer stood atop a ridge overlooking dry mesa, the familiar weight of his revolver resting against his hip. Around him, Reyes, Eagle-Eye Hatch, and a handful of battle-worn fighters prepared for what would be their final confrontation. The quiet old man who had once seemed so harmless was now the heart of a resistance that refused to die. Days of skirmishes had worn both sides thin. The vultures' numbers were dwindling, but their desperation had grown into madness. They had nothing left to lose and everything to destroy. Eli's strategy was clear. Instead of charging head-on into the fortified town, they would lure the gang out, picking them off in the canyons and ravines where the vultures' numbers and weapons meant less. We hit them fast. We hit them hard, Eli said, voice calm but commanding. We don't give them a chance to regroup. Hatch cracked a rare smile. Just like old times, huh? Eli nodded, the corners of his mouth twitching into a ghost of a grin. As night fell, the first move came. Reyes and a small team set a fire just beyond the southern ridge, smoke curling thick and black into the sky. The red vultures took the bait, guns blazing. They charged out of their defenses toward the flames right into Eli's trap. From concealed positions among rocks and brush, Eli and his fighters picked them off with deadly precision. Shots rang out, sharp and unforgiving. The battle was fierce, brutal. At one point, Colt Branner's younger brother appeared in the fray, eyes wild with fury. He was faster than Colt ever was and twice as vicious. Reyes faced him down, their pistols flashing in the moonlight. The fight ended when Reyes's bullet found its mark. By dawn, the red vultures were broken, their leader captured, their stronghold in ruins. Eli stood quietly, watching the sun rise over a town that had been given back to its people. Reyes approached him, exhausted but victorious. You did it, she said softly. Eli shook his head. We did it. Together. The townsfolk emerged cautiously, eyes wide with hope. But peace, Eli knew, was a fragile thing in the West. As he packed his gear that morning, the wind carried a new letter, tied to a messenger's saddle, another call, another battle waiting just beyond the horizon. Eli folded the letter, the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. Some ghosts never stay buried. The dawn was cold, the sky streaked with pale gold as Eli packed his worn leather bag. The taste of victory still lingered, but so did the weight of what was to come. The West was restless, and so were the old ghosts that haunted its trails. The letter was brief. No flowery words. No promises. Just a location, Black Canyon, and a warning, they know you're coming. Eli looked up as Reyes approached, her face unreadable. Another call? She asked. Eli nodded. Old enemies, new fires. Reyes frowned. We thought the red vultures were the worst. What could be worse? Eli's gaze drifted to the horizon. Men I thought long dead. And a debt that never settles. The journey to Black Canyon was somber. The wind whispered through the scrub, carrying memories Eli had tried to forget. Years ago, he had faced a gang called the Crimson Blades, ruthless killers who'd once threatened to burn the West to ashes. Eli's gun had ended their reign, but only after a price. Now, it seemed, the Blades' last surviving members had regrouped, hungry for revenge at the edge of Black Canyon. Eli and Reyes met with a small band of fighters, some new faces, some old allies who had answered the call. Eagle-Eye Hatch was among them, his steady hand a reminder that the fight was far from over. They moved carefully, knowing the Blades lay in wait. The canyon walls echoed with the distant sound of hooves and gunfire. Ambushes came swift and brutal, dust rose in choking clouds, mingling with smoke and cries. Eli's experience proved invaluable, guiding his team through deadly terrain with tactics born from decades of hard lessons. But the Crimson Blades were cunning and vicious, striking at every opportunity. Friendships were tested, loyalties questioned. In the thick of one skirmish, Reyes was pinned down, a bullet grazing her shoulder. Eli reached her just in time, covering her retreat with precise shots. Not bad for an old man, she gasped, eyes fierce despite the pain. Eli smiled, the fire of youth flickering in his gaze. And you're tougher than most I've trained. As the sun set behind the canyon, Eli faced the Blades' leader, a man whose scarred face was as ruthless as the desert heat. Their guns spoke in cold, rapid bursts. In the end, Eli's aim was truer. The Blades scattered, their threat broken but not forgotten. That night, around a campfire, Eli reflected on the relentless cycle of violence that defined the West. Rhea sat beside him, her voice quiet. Do you ever wish you could stop? Eli stared into the flames. Sometimes, but some fires don't burn out. They just wait. The sun rose slow over the wide expanse of the West, painting the land gold and amber. Eli sat on the porch of his cabin in Sagebrush Hollow, the same spot he'd occupied years before when the Branner gang first came knocking. The quiet old man had become a legend, not for his violence, but for his wisdom and unyielding spirit. The battles had ended, but their marks remained. Eli's hands were steady but worn, his eyes sharp but tired. Around him, the town had healed, the scars of gunfire softened by time and courage. He was no longer just a teacher of guns. He was a guardian of peace, the kind born from hard lessons and harder choices. Reyes, Eagle-Eye Hatch, and others had scattered across the West, carrying Eli's teachings like a torch passed from hand to hand. Some had found new lives. Others still rode the dusty trails, ready to defend the weak and challenge the wicked. But none forgot the man who trained them. One evening, as twilight bathed the horizon, a young boy approached Eli's porch. "Mr. Mercer," the boy asked, wide-eyed. Eli looked up, smiling gently. "Have you got a story for me?" the boy asked. Eli nodded, reaching into his pocket for a small, worn notebook. "Maybe," Eli said softly, "but first, you've got to learn how to listen." The boy sat quietly as Eli began to share tales of the Old West, stories of courage, honor, and the price of survival. Not just stories of guns and violence, but of mercy and wisdom, because the quiet old man knew the deadliest gunfighter was the one who knew when not to draw. As night deepened, the stars blinking overhead like watchful eyes, Eli realized that his legacy wasn't in the bullets fired or the battles won, it was in the lessons passed down. The peace earned and the hope kindled in those who chose to walk a harder, quieter path. And so, in the vast silence of the West, the quiet old man sat, content that his story, and the stories of those he taught, would never be forgotten.